Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is the news brief. Today we're going to be talking about Sergio Gor, or Sergey Gorokhovsky, top Trump aide that turns out was born in the Soviet Union, and why it's a problem and why he was hiding it. And then we're going to discuss it together in the comments so you don't have to suffer alone and I don't have to suffer alone. So please leave your questions and suggestions and constructive criticism down below because I read all of it and I appreciate having this back and forth communication with you all. Let's go. Before we can start today's episode, as per usual, you can see I'm in my apartment, which means one thing. Last night, there was a horrendously massive attack, specifically on Kyiv. It did seem like almost everything that Russia has launched at Ukraine was actually targeted onto Kyiv. There was a massive explosion due to a drone hitting a residential 5-story building, actually about 4 streets down from me. It was a horrifying night, and I'm sure that you have heard this from Ukrainians before, what I'm about to say, but it was the largest attack that Russia has launched onto Kyiv since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. And it's not lost on me that this is what we say every single time, and therefore it probably loses its greater meaning. But that's because Russia continuously keeps increasing these attacks. Yesterday, there were 700 drones launched at Ukraine. 700 drones. And I want to stress this. When we say drones, I think most people in their head have a picture of a drone that looks something like your DJI Mavic 3 Pro, like, a civilian hobby drone. Those are not that. Shahed drones are 3 tall men's height. Shahed drones are huge. They're massive. They're really heavy. It's not like a Mavic smashing into your window. But that SUV carries a load of explosives. So one of such SUV-sized drones hit a residential building yesterday. There were many injuries. So far, we do not have a confirmation on the deaths. And of course, the search and rescue workers are still working on scene. Now, that's not the only place where drone debris has fell or smashed. There were many hit sites yesterday, although our air defense did as good of a job as they could. There were, in fact, I think somewhere around 3 in the morning, I was reading on OSINT channels to stay away from the windows because in my district, there were drone debris falling on people's roofs. Personally, I haven't been at the site yet, although it's really up the street a couple of blocks away. And I will go, frankly, right after I record this video, but for now, of course, I have work to do, and that's why I wasn't able to visit it still, even though it's midday. Everyone who could slept in later today because we had to, as we didn't have any sleep until very early hours of the morning. I personally was spending the night in a different neighborhood. My dogs were with my neighbor downstairs. I was in a neighborhood that I consider safer because it's closer to the president's office. And I will tell you, it was not safe there last night, which I'm saying this to give you the magnitude and the gravity of these attacks. Normally, when I spend the night at my partner's apartment, who again lives near the president's office, it's different because obviously, as you can imagine, near the managerial buildings of the country, the air defense is clearly much heavier and it's much better. Last night, it didn't feel that way. Last night was the loudest night I have ever heard in that location ever. There were things exploding above us. There were things definitely hitting sites. It was chaos. The ballistic missiles that Russia launched around 3 in the morning, along with the drones, sounded apocalyptic. And Kyiv was hit really, really hard. And it's becoming a pattern, but not a pattern we've seen before, because I think before that, the record drones that we've received onto one city or onto Ukraine at one time was about 450. Now, this is over 700 drones. So that's almost double the drones that we've received before. And you have seen the reports of the horrendous consequences of when it was 400 drones. Now, imagine how much worse it's going to be getting if Russia can single-handedly launch 700 drones at one time, not really that long after they have launched 450. With that said, the biggest scandal of the week is Sergio Gor, or actually Sergey Gorokhovsky. He's the director of the White House Office of Presidential Personnel under US President Donald Trump, and he was previously described when he was appointed for this position as probably the most powerful man you've never heard of. Because that's true. How many times have you heard his name before until this scandal actually was picked up by the media? So Sergio, or Sergey, actually was born in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, which at the time of his birth was the Soviet Union. Interestingly, that wouldn't really be a big deal if he wasn't hiding his background. He, in fact, refused to answer where he was born. He refused to ever bring up his background before. And the only reason that his background as a person born in the USSR was even revealed is because journalists did an investigation and actually looked at the sale of his house in Malta, and his birth certificate and those records were present there, and they could see that he was born in the USSR. Previously, he was described in the media as an immigrant from the Mediterranean island nation of Malta, which is kind of funny because, well, first of all, he spent 5 years of his childhood in Malta because his family had a house and a property there, and that's how they were able to obtain relevance or relation to Malta to begin with. And that's actually something that Russian people or USSR born people do very often. So his mother, when purchasing a property, said that her identity was Jewish. She did not necessarily say she was Russian or she was from the USSR, and that was in part that was likely by design. Again, a lot of former USSR/Russian people do that. They love obtaining Cypriot citizenships, Croatian citizenships, and Maltese citizenships. Because if you buy property for a large enough amount of money, you actually qualify for a citizenship in a lot of these island nations. And Cyprus is very popular for that. Croatia is very popular for that, and Malta is very popular for that. So realistically, he's not an immigrant from Malta. His family had just moved there and purchased property and obtained potentially Maltese passports, just so that they could hide their background as Russians. A lot of Russians do that today during the full-scale invasion in order to obtain citizenships of countries that are not Russia. Records indicate that Gore has had trips to Russia in 2018 and a year before that. And of course, his secretaries say that he's an avid traveler, and that's why he was doing that. He was using Russian Airlines Aeroflot to do that. And generally, he has quite a few connections to Moscow that are easy to trace. Now, to be fair, this wouldn't be nearly such big of a deal if his family wasn't listing their nationality as Israeli on their documents, on their company creations in Malta, and they weren't hiding their background this avidly. Now, he's not actually Uzbekistani because his last name does seem to be Russian, and a lot of Russian people as well during the Soviet Union were moving to Kazakhstan, to Uzbekistan, to Ukraine, to other places because, say, if you were a scientist or something like that, you could be deployed to locations around the USSR. But you would be Russian with Russian cultural heritage, and you would be identifying as Russian, and you would be very much tied to your Russian roots. So yeah, one of the biggest problems, I suppose, with him hiding his origin is the hiding of the origin itself. He is one of the most powerful men in America today. He's in charge of staffing the White House, approving people. He's in charge of assigning people to their roles. Also, interestingly, there is a rumor circulating in the press that he's also responsible for the Trump and Elon Musk breakup, so to speak. Also, interestingly, his 2018 trip to Russia was not just an avid traveler thing. To familiarize with facts, researching and discussing issues concerning relations between Russia and the United States, the trip was funded by the Cato Institute, a libertarian think tank based in Washington. So it was actually a Russia-United States relations trip, and it was by no means just him being a tourist and loving travel the way that his press team is describing the reasons for his travel to Moscow. Another reason why his background matters a lot is because he has still not been vetted for the permanent security clearance, despite literally overseeing the appointments of about 4,000 executive branch staff to implement Trump's agenda. And again, if you don't know anything about Russia and Russians and post-USSR, he's a chief staffer. He appoints people. He is responsible for basically everything that's going on in the White House that pertains to hiring and staffing. And that's a big problem because if someone has ties to the Soviet Union, hides their background, is so well connected to Russia, speaks Russian, and has all of these strange parts in their background, and also they haven't been cleared for security clearance permanently, and again, hid their background for so long, that's a huge issue. You can see how that's a huge issue. I don't think I need to explain to you how it is. Now, his background gets even more suspicious when you find out that the Post reported that Gore criticized the need for all appointees who need security clearances to pass vetting known as Standard Form 86 or SF 86, a 100-page set of questions required which include where the applicant was born and if they have foreign connections. So he criticized that, right? Because why wouldn't the United States want to know if their executive branch staffers have foreign connections? He said that his reasoning for that was that he was worried about the deep state weeding out Trump's picks, which is QAnon and conspiratorial to begin with. But again, he moved to the United States when he was a kid. So if he doesn't have any connections to Russia and if he doesn't have any necessarily anything to hide, why is he advocating for top security clearance officials to not have to disclose their A, place of birth, and B, foreign connections? That should be one of the easiest things to pass, and that should be one of the biggest requirements. And then again, interestingly, according to Elon Musk, he's the one who fueled the breakup between him and the president, and he called Gore a snake, which is, I mean, we don't necessarily listen to Elon Musk, and he has problems of his own. But at the same time, it's very interesting that it will be on his agenda to break up Elon Musk's and Trump's relationship. And it's interesting how he is this man behind the scenes that no one has heard of. He has so much power. No one knew anything about his background. He's so ominous. He has so many secrets. He advocates for staffers to keep their secrets, and he advocates for them to keep their foreign ties. It's a very interesting, very complex character, and that poses a very big danger to the United States being so high postulated. I'm very interested in where this scandal or where this story is going to lead us next because it's still developing, but I'm going to be keeping tabs on it, and you please let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. And as per usual, if you like this video, please forward it to a friend, give it a like, subscribe to this channel, and turn on all of your notifications so you don't miss when the next news brief comes out, and I will see you next time.